I think it's important in terms as the world goes forward that we have a common platform in terms of an ethics code around the world. Like you don't need ethics for country X that are different from ethics from country Y.
Hello, I'm Magali Laguerre-Wilkinson. Welcome to Ethics in Business in Their Own Words. ACCA, the Association of Chartered Certified Accountants, has teamed up with Carnegie Council and CFA Institute to produce this interview series launched in 2018 for Global Ethics Day. The series features global business leaders exploring how businesses are preparing for an ethical future in the face of challenges presented by globalization, technology, and human psychology. Today we're talking to Kevin Dancey, CEO of the International Federation of Accountants, or IFAC. IFAC is the global organization for the accountancy profession. With more than 175 members in 130 countries, IFAC represents nearly 3 million professional accountants across the globe. It is dedicated to serving the public interest by strengthening the profession and contributing to the development of strong international economies. What role does IFAC play in a community? In other words, in what way, if that's even plausible, would I recognize IFAC?
IFAC itself is a relatively small organization. We have about 80 employees. What's interesting is that of the 80 employees, they're from almost 30 different countries around the world, and they speak over 30 different languages. So you wouldn't see us so much on the front line. Who you would see on the front line, for example, in the US is the American Institute of CPAs, which is one of our member bodies. I'm from Canada, you would see CPA Canada. So the organizations you would see on the front line are the member bodies in the countries around the world.
How does IFAC and how does the accounting profession manage its impact on the environment?
Very interesting. Some people say the only ones who can save the world are accountants. The basis for that, now that's overstating the case, but what gets measured gets done. And accountants are really responsible for the language of business. How do companies, organizations get their story out? And a big emphasis nowadays is on sustainability reporting and what's going to happen down the road. And that's where accountants come to bear. Because if there's no language that allows companies to explain that in a useful way, an understandable way, a relevant way, and a reliable way, then it'll just be anecdotal. So that's the key way that accountants can play in that space.
We're talking about before just sort of how your members have their tentacles out in different ways in the community. Is IFAC invested in creating a diverse workforce?
Well, as I said, we have about 80 employees from over, just under 30 countries around the world. They speak over 30 different languages. This is the fourth time I've been a CEO, and this is by far the most diverse organization in terms of employees that I have seen. And in terms of what we do in terms of setting up committees and boards that support IFAC, obviously a key issue is, do we have the right geographic representation? Do we have the right gender representation, et cetera? So diversity is a key value that runs throughout IFAC.
So it's already part of the DNA of IFAC.
Absolutely. And it has to be, because as a global organization, you can't take a model that works in country X and just assume that that's going to work in every country around the world. You have to shape it so that it fits within the different cultures and countries around the world.
In that context, makes sense. Are accountants up to speed with technological change? I'm going to ask you a little bit about, what about artificial intelligence? Is that part of the evolution? Has it been welcomed?
Well, yes, it has been, and really it has to be, because you're not going to stop the technological change. I look at the change that I've seen in my career, and that's been huge. When I started, there was no internet, email, etc. There weren't even cell phones. There wasn't even voicemail. So I've seen a huge change throughout my career. And going forward, that change is going to be faster and more rapid. So we have to deal with it. And one of the things we're doing at IFAC to support a future-ready profession going forward is on the education front. Now, we can't come up with all the courses and advice, but we can leverage what's going on around the world to make sure that the various member bodies around the world know what's going on and can incorporate that into their education programs.
What is the greatest ethical challenge facing IFAC or the accounting field in general?
I think there's a couple. One, we support the International Ethics Board, and I think it's important in terms as the world goes forward that we have a common platform in terms of an ethics code around the world. Like you don't need ethics for country X that are different from ethics from country Y. So in terms of supporting that to get a common platform around the world is an initiative that IFAC is involved in, because that leads to harmonization in terms of ethics. Now, the key challenge for us probably right now is maintaining trust. Because as you know, trust, takes a long time to build up and you can lose it in a heartbeat. And one of the things about the business we're in is we can be right 99.9% of the time, but the 0.1% we're wrong is what we get tired with. So constantly trying to restore trust and build up trust is a key challenge for us and is a key area that we're working on all the time.
I'm going to ask you a little bit about the International Ethics Standards Board for accountants. A revised code of ethics has recently been implemented by the IESBA. What are the highlights of those changes, and how does IFAC support the standard setting for ethics?
Well, I'll deal with the last part first. In terms of supporting it, we hire the staff, we provide the facilities, we basically pay for it through funds that we get from our member bodies and global accounting firms. So we really provide the support for it. It is an independent board. We don't have any effect in terms of what the standards are, but we are the key support mechanism for it. It's made up of 18 individuals from around the world, some practitioners, some non-practitioners, some public members, etc. And that board is responsible for basically amending and renewing the International Code of Ethics.
So amending, how often does that happen?
The code was just renewed in 2019 in terms of being refreshed, a little reorganization to make it easier to use. There are constantly going to be areas that need to be looked at. For example, non-audit services. When you do an audit, you need to be independent. You got to be careful you're not doing too much in terms of the non-audit side. What's the right balance there? Also in terms of the business model going forward, in terms of if the fees from a particular client are too much, is that going to affect your objectivity and independence because you're so reliant on that organization? So there are, as business models change and as the world gets more complex and as the way people do business changes, just with the impacts of technology and everything else, do we still have do the principles that apply in terms of the way they have in the past, are they still going to support the professional accountant going forward?
You talk a lot in our conversation about trust. How is the accounting industry viewed by the general public, in your opinion, and from your position? Is it challenging to gain trust? And if so, and if it's not really there, what are you doing to rebuild it, to gain it again?
Well, as I said earlier, we work in a profession where you can be right 99.9% of the time, and the 0.1% of the time you're wrong is what tars you. Having said that, surveys we have done, kind of comparing professional accountants against other professions or media or politicians or NGOs, show actually that professional accountants come out fairly well. We did a recent one on tax. We surveyed the general public in the G20, which is across 20 different jurisdictions around the world. And when you compared professional tax accountants to lawyers, to politicians, to media, to NGOs, we came out on top. Now, having said that, we were just under 60%, so there's still a lot of room to go. And I think it's, just has to be a constant focus for us in terms of going forward. So in terms of things that we're looking at going forward, clearly it's supporting the ethics board. It's looking at other examples that we can, latch onto. We're looking at having some guidance in terms of professional conduct in relation to how you would operate a tax practice. What's the appropriate approach in terms of tax planning these days? Because there's a lot of stuff out there about tax evasion, tax avoidance, aggressive tax avoidance, etc. And you have to stay attuned to how the environment's changing, how boards of directors are changing in terms of how they assess that risk, to make sure that we as professional accountants still remain relevant to satisfy what their needs are. So,
there's always, at least speaking, in the United States, for the person who is, let's just say, not accountant literate.
Right.
That would be me, for instance. I think the lack of trust comes from a place where there's lack of comprehension, or people feel like they're trying to get caught in certain ways. Do you agree with that a little? Or?
Yeah, to a certain extent. Like when I think of the concept of trust these days, it's not just in relation to trust in terms of accountants. It's a trust in terms of media. It's a trust in terms of politicians and governments. There's a lot of lack of trust around a whole bunch of areas right now. Now, our area of focus is professional accountants, and that's where we're focusing. But this concept of lack of trust is not unique to us. It is across the landscape.
Before an assignment, do you have to? Is it like sort of? Is it a ritual to go through what the code of ethics are in your mind? I mean, is this something
Well, you have
that
to make
is-
sure that you believe you are competent to do that. Like for example, prior to doing an assignment, are you competent to do the role? You have the ability to do that role. Are you going to carry it out with the right confidentiality, with the right due care, with the right objectivity, etc.? So these are all concepts that fit into the way a professional accountant approaches his role.
And is there sort of like is there a mantra that accountants have to follow? Is there some inner prayer that you have to say before you do something?
No, it's not like that. It's not like that, but it needs to become part of your DNA. The DNA of an accountant just has to have a strong core in terms of a strong ethical core to do the job the right way.